So, Mr. David Molesky,
Yes.
why do we have these things on the table?
Well, we're going to talk about how to clean your brushes and how to properly dispose of your oily rags.
Shoot.
Okay. Here we have a tray and a jar. So I think jars, in my opinion, are fine for storing brushes in if they're not susceptible to like losing a point or their shape. So like these brushes, which are hog hair brushes, they'll probably stand up just fine to their own weight. But something like this smaller kind of detail brush for, I don't know, a miniature painting or something like that, I mean, this is not a good candidate for sitting on its end because it'll like turn into like a little hook shape and it'll kind of lose its usefulness. So I would always store something like this flat in a tray like this, or better yet, just put it down into the jar and then take a rag and just make sure that you remove all of the paint carefully.
Like wash it in oil.
Yeah. Because swish it around in oil until all of the pigment kind of comes out of the brush. And then if you want to not have to wash them in hot soap and water, then you can leave it in the jar or leave it in the tray. Like soft synthetic brushes or brushes that are, like a sable brush, brushes that are good
like
for
finer
blending.
brushes, detail.
Yeah. And then I would also not leave them kind of sitting like that because they'll lose their shape. And the finer the brush, the more care you should probably take of it. And that's also kind of the nice thing of not using really fine brushes, is because you can you are not a slave to cleaning them.
So what I generally do is just, in any case, just to wipe off and then put it down. So I clean them as little as possible to not make them brittle or make them.
Yeah, the oil kind of keeps the hairs conditioned. If you're using a lot of solvents all the time, it will start to make it more brittle and more likely to fray. A lot of soaps can do that also. I use a oil-based soap. It's called Jack's brush soap, and it's an oil-based soap. So it cleans it.
What type of oil?
I think it's a linseed oil. So it conditions it as well.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like a jar a little bit bigger than this. It looks kind of like a orange snot kind of. I mean, it's gooey and works well. A lot of my friends in New York were using it, and that's where I first learned about it. Taking care of brushes. But the other thing that we're going to talk about is what to do with the oil rag. I don't know if people are aware that oil-soaked rags can spontaneously combust. I mean, it's almost seems like something that's hard to believe, that, a rag just sitting there can just catch on fire without any flame around. But it happens. I know people it's happened to, and I heard, I should confirm with David Dawson, who's was Lucian Freud's assistant, that he had 2 big studio fires from rags. Yeah.
So do you know anything about, just very shortly, on the actual physics or what chemically, what happens when this ignite?
My understanding, I could stand to be corrected, but my scientific understanding is that the oil, the rag, whether the rag is soaked with solvent or oil, the rag, because of its structure of fibers and everything, allows a greater surface area than if you were to pour the liquid onto a table. And so with the increased surface area, you have more of the oil interacting with oxygen.
Right.
And when it's going through that chemical reaction where the amino acids are turning into the lipid chains, there's some heat involved. And,
release of energy.
Yeah. And so then it can spontaneously combust. So the way to avoid that is to remove the access of the oil to oxygen. So some people have these big cans. Sometimes you see them in like a car mechanic shop. They're these nice metal cans with a very heavy lid and a foot pedal, and the lid comes down very strongly to cut off the oxygen. And if there was a small fire, it's very solid metal. It wouldn't catch other things on fire outside of the can. I think those are good for times when you have a lot of rags. But for me personally, one painter working in a studio, I feel like a cookie tin is like enough.
Just to seal off the excess.
Yeah, because the tin lid kind of fits on tightly because they're designed that way to keep the cookies fresh. But I personally think they're just fine. It's metal, the lid goes on securely, but I kind of use them as a temporary storage because eventually they do fill up, and that's good about the small size as well. So I chuck the rags in there. Maybe at the end of the day, then I'll take like a bag. In my case, I use any small plastic bag I have around, newspaper bag, old produce bag, my dog's, poop bags, put the rag in, and then I add a little bit of water into the bag to like further, make sure there's no oxygen. And
why would water help?
Well, the water is kind of going around the rag, and then I kind of squeeze out all the extra air, and then I tie it off. And then, it's pretty safe to say that there's no oxygen getting to that thing.
Because I thought, this is what I've heard at least, that, it doesn't involve water, but if you have a rag, you put it together and in a plastic bag, then it doesn't the vapor or the chemicals that are released are not able to escape, and that's when it can increase, the heat can increase and it starts burning in the end. But you're saying that it's the excess of oxygen that decides that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, because if a fire doesn't have oxygen, it's not going to burn.
No.
Yeah. So I collect them like this, and then can put it in my normal garbage and not worry about having a trash can fire.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
So that's what I do. If you're a studio with multiple painters working and there was a larger accumulation of rags, I think one of those larger trash cans designed to collect those would be a good idea. I know a lot of painting schools have them. You see them around. But otherwise, just like a small, one person cookie tin, I think is pretty good. And then, I can feel very secure that I'm not going to start a fire in that situation.
Good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, that's basically the brush cleanup and rag disposal. One more thing to add about the brushes, since I'm seeing them, is if they're really gunked up when I'm cleaning them in the soap, sometimes I'll use a wire brush, like at the bottom of the sink, and I'll kind of comb them, or a nail brush, like a hog hair nail brush. Yeah. And that just helps them get a little cleaner.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for checking out this video from the School of Apelles. Go to caveofapelles.com/subscribe and access our premium library. That's caveofapelles.com/subscribe.